Hello friends, welcome back my YouTube channel. If you want to watch the super hit movie Titanic in full HD, then first of all, give this video a like. And if you are visiting our channel for the first time, then subscribe to this channel. The name of the movie we are going to discuss in today's video is Titanic. So we will give you information about how and where you will get to watch Titanic film officially. Apart from this, we will give you a detailed look at the pre-production, post-production, budget, box office collection, and filming of this movie. A detailed review of the movie will also be given in this video, where we will explain the story of this movie in detail. We will also discuss the cast and casting performance of the movie. Apart from this, information about the music department and technical department will also be given. Because of this video is going to be very interesting and entertaining. So, you must watch this video till the end. And if you haven't liked this video yet, then like this video now and subscribe to this channel. So, let's start the video. Titanic is a 1997 American epic romantic disaster film written and directed by James Cameron. Incorporating both historical and fictionalized aspects, it is based on accounts of the sinking of RMS Titanic in 1912. The film stars Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet as members of different social classes who fall in love during the ship's maiden voyage. The film also features an ensemble cast of Billy Zane, Kathy Bates, Frances Fisher, Bernard Hill, Jonathan Hyde, Danny Nucci, David Warner, and Bill Paxton. Cameron's inspiration for the film came from his fascination with shipwrecks. He felt a love story interspersed with human loss would be essential to convey the emotional impact of the disaster. Production began on September 1, 1995, when Cameron shot footage of the Titanic wreck. The modern scenes on the research vessel were shot on board the academic Mstislav Keldysh, which Cameron had used as a base when filming the wreck. Scale models, computer-generated imagery, and a reconstruction of the Titanic built at Baja Studios were used to recreate the sinking. The film was initially in development at 20th Century Fox, but a mounting budget and being behind schedule resulted in Fox asking Paramount Pictures for financial help. Paramount handled distribution in the United States and Canada, while Fox released the film in other territories. Titanic was the most expensive film ever made at the time. With a production budget of $200 million, filming took place from July 1996 to March 1997. Titanic premiered at the Tokyo International Film Festival on November 1, 1997, and was released in the United States on December 19th. It was praised for its visual effects, performances, particularly those of DiCaprio, Winslet, and Gloria Stewart, production values, direction, score, cinematography, story, and emotional depth. Among other awards, it was nominated for 14 Academy Awards and won a record-tying 11, including Best Picture and Best Director, tying Ben-Hur, 1959, for the most Academy Awards won by a film. With an initial worldwide gross of over $1.84 billion, Titanic was the first film to reach the billion-dollar mark. It was the highest-grossing film of all time until Cameron's next film, Avatar 2009, surpassed it in 2010. Income from the initial theatrical release, retail video, and soundtrack sales and U.S. broadcast rights exceeded $3.2 billion. A number of re-releases have pushed the film's worldwide theatrical total to $2.264 billion, making it the second film to gross more than $2 billion worldwide after Avatar. The Library of Congress selected it for preservation in the United States National Film Registry for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant in 2017. Plot: in 1996, aboard the research vessel academic Mstislav Keldysh, treasure hunter Brock Lovett and his team explore the wreck of RMS Titanic, hoping to find a necklace known as the Heart of the Ocean. Instead, they recover a safe containing a drawing of a young woman wearing the necklace. The sketch is dated April 14, 1912, the day the Titanic struck an iceberg and sank, resulting in about 1,500 deaths. After seeing a television report about the discovery, centenarian Rose Dawson Calvert contacts Lovett, revealing herself as the woman in the drawing. Hoping she can help locate the necklace, Lovett brings Rose and her granddaughter aboard the Keldysh, where Rose recounts her experience as a Titanic passenger. In 1912, 17-year-old Rose DeWitt Bukater boards the Titanic in Southampton with her wealthy fiancé, Cal Hockley, and her mother, Ruth, who stresses that Rose's marriage to Cal will resolve their financial problems. However, Rose is unhappy in the loveless engagement. Feeling trapped, Rose contemplates suicide by jumping from the ship's stern, but is stopped by Jack Dawson, a poor nomadic artist. Jack and Rose form a friendship, and Jack confesses his growing feelings for her. Though initially resistant, Rose realizes she has fallen in love with Jack, despite Cal's and Ruth's disapproval. Rose brings Jack to her stateroom and asks him to draw her nude wearing only the necklace. Afterward, they evade Cal's valet, Spicer Lovejoy, and have sex in a car in the cargo hold. On the forward deck, they witness the ship's collision with an iceberg and overhear officers discussing the severity of the situation. When Cal discovers Jack's sketch of Rose and a mocking note she left, he arranges to frame Jack for theft by having Lovejoy plant the necklace on him. Jack is arrested and locked in the Master-at-Arms office, while Cal places the necklace in his own coat pocket. As the ship begins sinking, women and children are prioritized for the lifeboats. Rose finds and frees Jack, and they return to the deck, where Cal urges Rose to board a lifeboat, claiming he and Jack will board another. He unwittingly wraps his coat, containing the necklace, around her. However, as her lifeboat is lowered, Rose jumps back onto the sinking ship, unwilling to leave Jack behind. Enraged, Cal grabs a pistol and chases them through the flooding ship, but gives up when they escape. Cal manages to secure a place on a lifeboat by pretending to be a child's father. As the ship's flooded bow sinks, the stern rises into the air, and Jack and Rose cling to the railing. The ship splits in two, and the stern sinks into the freezing water with the remaining passengers. Jack helps Rose onto floating debris and makes her promise to survive and live a full life. Jack dies from hypothermia, but Rose is saved by a returning lifeboat and later rescued by the RMS Carpathia. Rose remains hidden from Cal and her mother and gives her name as Rose Dawson on her arrival in New York City. In the present, Rose reveals that Cal committed suicide after losing his fortune in the 1929 stock market crash. She tells the Keldysh crew that Jack saved her in every possible way and laments that her memories are all that she has left of him. Touched by her account of the Titanic, Lovett abandons his search for the necklace. Alone at night on the stern of the Keldysh, Rose, who has kept the necklace in her possession all along, drops it into the sea above the wreck. Later, as she lies in her bed, photographs on her dresser depict a life of freedom and adventure inspired by Jack. Aboard the pristine and undamaged Titanic, a young Rose reunites with Jack at the grand staircase, applauded by the passengers and crew who died in the sinking. Cast: fictional characters. Leonardo DiCaprio as Jack Dawson. Jack is portrayed as an itinerant, poor orphan from Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, who has traveled the world, including Paris. He wins 2 third-class tickets for the Titanic in a poker game and travels with his friend Fabrizio. He is attracted to Rose at first sight. Her fiancé's invitation to dine with them the next evening enables Jack to mix with first-class passengers for a night. Cameron's original choice for the role was River Phoenix. However, he died in 1993. Although Jack Dawson was a fictional character, in Fairview Cemetery in Halifax, Nova Scotia, where 121 victims are buried, there is a grave labeled J. Dawson. The producers did not know of the real J. Dawson until after the film was released. Kate Winslet as Rose DeWitt Bukater. Rose is a 17-year-old girl from Philadelphia who is forced into an engagement to 30-year-old Cal Hockley so she and her mother, Ruth, can maintain their high-class status after her father's death left the family debt-ridden. Rose boards Titanic with Cal and Ruth as a first-class passenger and meets Jack. Gloria Stewart as the modern-day Rose Dawson Calvert. Rose narrates the film in a framing device. Billy Zane as Cal Hockley, Rose's arrogant and snobbish 30-year-old fiancé, who is the heir to a Pittsburgh steel fortune. He is resentful of Rose's affection for Jack. Frances Fisher as Ruth DeWitt Bukater, Rose's widowed mother, who arranges Rose's engagement to Cal to maintain her family's high society status. Like many aristocratic passengers portrayed in the film, her disposition is elitist and frivolous. She loves her daughter, but believes that social position is more important than having a loving marriage. She strongly dislikes Jack, even though he saved her daughter's life. Bill Paxton as Brock Lovett, a treasure hunter looking for the heart of the ocean in the wreck of the Titanic in the present. Time and funding for his expedition are running out. He reflects at the film's conclusion that despite thinking about Titanic for 3 years, he has never understood it until he hears Rose's story. Susie Amis as Elizabeth Lizzie Calvert, Rose's granddaughter, who accompanies her when she visits Lovett on the ship and learns of her grandmother's romantic past with Jack Dawson. Danny Nucci as Fabrizio De Rossi, Jack's Italian best friend, who boards Titanic with him after Jack wins 2 tickets in a poker game. Fabrizio fails to board a lifeboat when the Titanic sinks and is killed when one of the ship's funnels breaks and crashes into the water, crushing him and several other passengers to death. David Warner as Spicer Lovejoy, an ex-Pinkerton constable and Cal's English valet and bodyguard. He monitors Rose and is suspicious about the circumstances surrounding Jack rescuing her. He dies when the Titanic splits in half, causing him to fall into a massive opening. Warner also appeared in the 1979 TV miniseries SOS Titanic, portraying passenger Lawrence Beasley. Jason Barry as Tommy Ryan, an Irish third-class passenger who befriends Jack and Fabrizio. Tommy is killed when he is accidentally pushed forward and shot by a panicked First Officer Murdoch. Alexandria Owens Sarno as Cora Cartmel, a young third-class girl who dances with Jack at the Irish party. In a deleted scene, Cora and her family drowned after they were trapped at the locked third-class gate. Camilla Overby Roos as Helga Dahl, a Norwegian immigrant and third-class passenger who falls in love with Fabrizio. While most of her scenes were cut and the secondary significance of her character was drastically reduced from the original screenplay to the final theatrical cut, Helga is most notably seen clinging onto the rail of the ship's stern with Jack and Rose before slipping into the frigid waters below. Amy Gaipa as Trudy Bolt, Rose's personal maid. Historical characters, Kathy Bates as Margaret Molly Brown. Brown is looked down upon by other first-class women, including Ruth, as vulgar and new money. She is friendly to Jack and lends him a suit of evening clothes, bought for her son, when he is invited to dinner in the first-class dining saloon. She was dubbed the unsinkable Molly Brown by historians because, with the support of other women, she commandeered Lifeboat 6 from Quartermaster Robert Hitchens. Some aspects of this altercation are portrayed in Cameron's film. Victor Garber as Thomas Andrews, the ship's builder. Andrews is portrayed as a kind, decent man who is modest about his grand achievement. After the collision, he tries to convince the others, particularly Ismay, that it is a mathematical certainty that the ship will sink. He is depicted during the sinking of the ship as standing next to the clock in the first-class smoking room, lamenting his failure to build a strong and safe ship. Although this has become one of the most famous legends of the sinking of the Titanic, this story, which was published in a 1912 book, Thomas Andrews, Shipbuilder, and thereafter perpetuated, came from John Stewart, a steward on the ship who in fact left the ship in boat number 15 at approximately 1:40 a.m. There were testimonies of sightings of Andrews after that moment. It appears that Andrews stayed in the smoking room for some time to gather his thoughts. Then he continued assisting with the evacuation. Bernard Hill as Captain Edward John Smith. Smith planned to make the Titanic his final voyage before retiring. He retreats into the wheelhouse on the bridge as the ship sinks, dying when the windows burst from the water pressure whilst he clings to the ship's wheel. There are conflicting accounts as to whether he died in this manner or later froze to death in the water near the capsized collapsible lifeboat B. Jonathan Hyde as J. Bruce Ismay, White Star Line's ignorant, boorish managing director. With the prospect of an earlier arrival in New York and favorable press attention, Ismay influences Captain Smith to go faster. Although this situation appears in popular portrayals of the disaster, it is unsupported by evidence. After the collision, he struggles to comprehend that his unsinkable ship is doomed. Ismay later boards Collapsible C, one of the last lifeboats to leave the ship, just before it is lowered. He was branded a coward by the press and public for surviving the disaster while many women and children drowned. Eric Braeden as John Jacob Astor IV, a first-class passenger and the richest man on the ship. In the film, Rose introduces Jack to Astor and his 18-year-old wife, Madeline, Charlotte Chatton, in the first-class dining saloon. During the introduction, Astor asks whether Jack is connected to the Boston Dawsons, a question Jack deflects by saying that he is instead affiliated with the Chippewa Falls Dawsons. Astor is last seen as the glass dome over the grand staircase implodes and water surges in. Bernard Fox as Colonel Archibald Gracie IV. The film depicts Gracie making a comment to Cal that women and machinery don't mix, and congratulating Jack for saving Rose from falling off the ship, unaware that Jack saved Rose from a suicide attempt. He is later seen offering to lead Jack and Rose to the remaining lifeboats during the sinking. Fox portrayed Frederick Fleet in the 1958 film A Night to Remember. Michael Ensign as Benjamin Guggenheim, a mining magnate traveling in first class. He shows off his French mistress, Madame Aubert, Fanny Brett, to his fellow passengers, while his wife and 3 daughters wait for him at home. When Jack joins the first-class passengers for dinner after rescuing Rose, Guggenheim refers to him as a bohemian. Guggenheim is seen in the flooding grand staircase during the sinking, saying he is prepared to go down as a gentleman. Jonathan Evans-Jones as Wallace Hartley, the ship's bandmaster and violinist, who plays uplifting music with his colleagues on the boat deck as the ship sinks. As the final plunge begins, he leads the band in a final performance of Nearer My God to Thee to the tune of Bethany and dies in the sinking. Mark Lindsay Chapman as Chief Officer, Henry Wilde, the ship's chief officer, who lets Cal board a lifeboat because he has a child in his arms. Before he dies, he tries to get boats to return to the sinking site to rescue passengers by blowing his whistle. After he freezes to death, Rose uses his whistle to attract the attention of 5th Officer Lowe, leading to her rescue. Ewan Stewart as First Officer William Murdoch, 19, the officer in charge of the bridge when the Titanic struck an iceberg. During a rush for the lifeboats, Murdoch shoots Tommy Ryan, as well as another passenger, in a momentary panic and then commits suicide by shooting himself in the head. When Murdoch's nephew Scott saw the film, he objected to his uncle's portrayal, seeing it as damaging to Murdoch's heroic reputation. A few months later, Fox Vice President Scott Neeson went to Dalbeattie, Scotland, where Murdoch lived, to deliver a personal apology and also presented a £5,000 donation to Dalbeattie High School to boost the school's William Murdoch Memorial Prize. Cameron apologized on the DVD commentary, but stated that there were officers who fired gunshots to enforce the Women and Children First policy. According to Cameron, his depiction of Murdoch is that of an honorable man, not of a man gone bad or of a cowardly murderer. He added, "I'm not sure you'd find that same sense of responsibility and total devotion to duty today. This guy had half of his lifeboats launched before his counterpart on the port side had even launched one. That says something about character and heroism." Jonathan Phillips as Second Officer Charles Lightoller. Lightoller took charge of the port side evacuation. In the film, Lightoller informs Captain Smith that it will be difficult to see icebergs without breaking water, and, after the collision, suggests that the crew begin boarding women and children in the lifeboats. He is seen brandishing a gun and threatening to use it to keep order. He can be seen on top of Collapsible B when the first funnel collapses. Lightoller was the most senior officer to survive the disaster. Film producer Kevin Delanoy as Third Officer Herbert Pittman, who survived the sinking and manned Lifeboat 5. Simon Crane as Fourth Officer Joseph Boxhall, the officer in charge of firing flares and manning Lifeboat 2 during the sinking. He is shown on the bridge wings, helping the seamen firing the flares. Eoin Grufford as Fifth Officer Harold Lowe, the only officer to lead a lifeboat to retrieve survivors of the sinking from the icy waters. The film depicts Lowe rescuing Rose. Edward Fletcher as Sixth Officer James Moody, the only junior officer to have died in the sinking. The film depicts Moody admitting Jack and Fabrizio onto the ship only moments before it departs from Southampton. Moody is later shown following Murdoch's orders to put the ship to full speed ahead and informs Murdoch about the iceberg. He is last seen clinging to one of the davits on the starboard side after having unsuccessfully attempted to launch Collapsible A. James Lancaster as Father Thomas Byles, a second-class passenger and a Catholic priest from England. He is portrayed praying and consoling passengers during the ship's final moments. Lou Poulter and Elsa Raven as Isidore and Ida Strauss. Isidore is a former owner of R.H. Macy & Company, a former congressman from New York, and a member of the New York and New Jersey Bridge Commission. During the sinking, the couple were offered seats on a lifeboat together. Isidore refused to go before all women and children have been evacuated, and urged his wife Ida to go ahead. Ida is portrayed refusing to board the lifeboat, saying that she will honor her wedding pledge by staying with Isidore. They are last seen lying on their bed, embracing each other as water fills their stateroom. The real Isidore and Ida Strauss were also seen in an embrace, but were actually seated on chairs in the A deck before being swept by waves as the ship made its final plunge. Martin Jarvis as Sir Cosmo Duff Gordon, a Scottish baronet who is rescued in Lifeboat 1. Lifeboats 1 and 2 were emergency boats with a capacity of 40. Situated at the forward end of the boat deck, these were kept ready to launch in case of a person falling overboard. On the night of the disaster, Lifeboat 1 was the fourth to be launched, with 12 people aboard, including Duff Gordon, his wife, and her secretary. The baronet was much criticized for his conduct during the incident. It was suggested that he had boarded the emergency boat in violation of the Women and Children First policy, and that the boat had failed to return to rescue those struggling in the water. He offered £5 to each of the lifeboat's crew, which those critical of his conduct viewed as a bribe. The Duff Gordons at the time, and his wife's secretary in a letter written at the time and rediscovered in 2007, stated that there had been no women or children waiting to board in the vicinity of the launching of their boat. There is confirmation that Lifeboat 1 of the Titanic was almost empty, and that First Officer William Murdoch was apparently glad to offer Duff Gordon and his wife and her secretary a place, simply to fill it, after they had asked if they could get on. Duff Gordon denied that his offer of money to the lifeboat crew represented a bribe. The British Board of Trade's inquiry into the disaster accepted Duff Gordon's denial of bribing the crew, but maintained that if the emergency boat had rowed towards the people who were in the water, it might very well have been able to rescue some of them. Rosalind Ayres as Lady Duff Gordon, a world-famous fashion designer and Sir Cosmo's wife. She is rescued in Lifeboat 1 with her husband. They never lived down rumors that they had forbidden the lifeboat's crew to return to the wreck site in case they would be swamped. Jarvis and Ayres were husband and wife in real life. Rochelle Rose as Noelle Leslie, Countess of Roths. The Countess is shown to be friendly with Cal and the DeWitt Bucaters. Despite being of a higher status in society than Sir Cosmo and Lady Duff Gordon, she is kind and helps row the boat and even looks after the steerage passengers. Scott G. Anderson as Frederick Fleet, the lookout who saw the iceberg. Fleet escapes the sinking ship aboard Lifeboat 6. Paul Brightwell as Quartermaster Robert Hitchens, one of the 6 quartermasters and at the ship's wheel at the time of collision. He is in charge of Lifeboat 6. He refuses to go back and pick up survivors after the sinking, and eventually the boat is commandeered by Molly Brown. Martin East as Reginald Lee, the other lookout in the crow's nest. He survives the sinking. Gregory Cook as Jack Phillips, the senior wireless operator whom Captain Smith ordered to send the distress signal. Craig Kelly as Harold Bride, a junior wireless operator. Liam Tuohy as Chief Baker Charles Jokin. The baker appears in the film helping Rose stand up after she falls, following her and Jack to the ship's stern, and finally hanging onto the ship's railing as it sinks, drinking brandy from a flask. According to the real Jokin's testimony, he rowed the ship down and stepped into the water without getting his hair wet. He also admitted to hardly feeling the cold, most likely thanks to alcohol. In a deleted scene, he's shown throwing deck chairs overboard before taking a drink from his bottle. Terry Forrestal as Chief Engineer, Joseph G. Bell. Bell and his men worked throughout the sinking to keep the lights and the power on in order for distress signals to get out. The film portrays Bell and all of the engineers as having died in the bowels of the Titanic. However, there is evidence to suggest that at least some of the engineers were released to come on deck when the flooding became severe. Greaser Frederick Scott testified to seeing 8 engineers between approximately 1:50 and 1:55 a.m. standing up against the electric crane on the starboard boat deck. By then, all the lifeboats had gone. Cameos. Several crew members of the academic Mstislav Keldysh appear, including Anatoly Segalovich, the creator and pilot of the Mir self-propelled deep submergence vehicle. Van Ling portrayed real-life Chinese survivor Fang Lang. His backstory inspired Cameron to produce a documentary, The Six, based on a group of Chinese survivors who survived the sinking. Anders Falk, who filmed a documentary about the film's sets for the Titanic Historical Society, makes a cameo appearance in the film as a Swedish immigrant whom Jack Dawson meets when he enters his cabin. Edward Kamuda and Karen Kamuda, then president and vice president of the society, who served as film consultants, were cast as extras in the film. Production, pre-production, inspiration, and writing. James Cameron has long had a fascination with shipwrecks, and for him, Titanic was the Mount Everest of shipwrecks. He was almost past the point in his life when he felt he could consider an undersea expedition, but said he still had a mental restlessness to live the life he had turned away from when he switched from the sciences to the arts in college. When an IMAX film, Titanica, was made from footage shot of the Titanic wreck, Cameron decided to seek Hollywood funding for his own expedition. "It was not because I particularly wanted to make the movie," Cameron said. "I wanted to dive to the shipwreck." Cameron wrote a scriptment for a Titanic film, met with 20th Century Fox executives, including Peter Chernin, and pitched it as Romeo and Juliet on the Titanic. Cameron said the executives were unconvinced of the commercial potential and had instead hoped for action scenes similar to his previous films. They approved the project as they hoped for a long-term relationship with Cameron. Cameron convinced Fox to promote the film based on the publicity afforded by shooting the Titanic wreck and organized several dives over a period of 2 years. He also convinced Fox that shooting the real wreck for the film scenes instead of simulating it with special effects would provide value. "We can either do the shots with elaborate models and motion control shots and CG and all that, which will cost X amount of money, or we can spend X plus 30% and actually go shoot it at the real wreck." The crew shot at the wreck in the Atlantic Ocean 12 times in 1995. The work was risky, as the water pressure could kill the crew if there were a tiny flaw in the submersible structure. Additionally, adverse conditions prevented Cameron from getting footage. During one dive, one of the submersibles collided with Titanic's hull, damaging both sub and ship and leaving fragments of the submersible's propeller shroud scattered around the superstructure. The external bulkhead of the captain's quarters collapsed, exposing the interior, and the area around the entrance to the grand staircase was damaged. Descending to the site emphasized to the crew that the Titanic disaster was not simply a story of fiction, but a real event with real loss of life. Cameron said, "Working around the wreck for so much time, you get such a strong sense of the profound sadness and injustice of it, and the message of it." He felt a great mantle of responsibility to convey the emotional message of the story, as he was aware there might never be another filmmaker to visit the wreck. Cameron felt the Titanic sinking was like a great novel that really happened, but that the event had become a mere morality tale. The film would give audiences the experience of living the history. The treasure hunter Brock Lovett represented those who never connected with the human element of the tragedy. He believed that the romance of Jack and Rose would be the most engaging element. When their love is finally destroyed, the audience would mourn the loss. He said, "All my films are love stories, but in Titanic I finally got the balance right. It's not a disaster film, it's a love story with a fastidious overlay of real history." After filming the underwater shots, Cameron began writing the screenplay. He wanted to honor the people who died and spent 6 months researching the Titanic's crew and passengers. He created a detailed timeline of the events of the voyage and sinking and had it verified by historical experts. From the beginning of the shoot, the team had a very clear picture of what happened on the ship. Cameron said, "That set the bar higher in a way. It elevated the movie in a sense. We wanted this to be a definitive visualization of this moment in history, as if you'd gone back in a time machine and shot it." Cameron was influenced by the 1958 British film about the Titanic, A Night to Remember, which he had seen as a youth. He liberally copied some dialogue and scenes, including the lively party of the passengers in steerage and the musicians playing on the deck during the sinking. Cameron framed the romance with the elderly Rose to make the intervening years palpable and poignant. While Winslet and Stewart believed Rose dies at the end of the film, Cameron said, "The answer has to be something you supply personally, individually." Scale Modeling, Harland and Wolff, Titanic's builders, opened their private archives to the crew, sharing blueprints that were previously thought lost. For the ship's interiors, production designer Peter Lamont's team looked for artifacts from the era. The newness of the ship meant every prop had to be made from scratch. Fox acquired 40 acres of waterfront south of Playas de Rosarito in Mexico and began building a new studio on May 31, 1996. A horizon tank of 17 million gallons was built for the exterior of the reconstructed ship, providing 270 degrees of ocean view. The ship was built to full scale, but Lamont removed redundant sections on the superstructure and forward well deck for the ship to fit in the tank, with the remaining sections filled with digital models. The lifeboats and funnels were shrunk by 10%. The boat deck and A deck were working sets, but the rest of the ship was steel plating. Within was a 50-foot lifting platform for the ship to tilt during the sinking sequences. The 60-foot 1/8 scale model of the stern section was designed by the naval architect J. Cantola using plans of the Titanic's sister ship RMS Olympic. Above the model was a 162-foot tall, 49 meters, tower crane on 600 feet, 180 meters of rail track, acting as a combined construction, lighting, and camera platform. The sets representing the interior rooms of the Titanic were reproduced exactly using photographs and plans from the Titanic's builders. The grand staircase, which features prominently in the film, was recreated to a high standard, though it was widened 30% compared to the original and reinforced with steel girders. Craftsmen from Mexico and Britain sculpted the ornate paneling and plasterwork based on Titanic's original designs. The carpeting, upholstery, individual pieces of furniture, light fixtures, chairs, cutlery, and crockery with the White Star Line crest on each piece were among the objects recreated according to original designs. Cameron hired 2 Titanic historians, Don Lynch and Ken Marshall, to authenticate the historical detail. Casting. Cameron said he needed the cast to feel they were really on the Titanic, to relive its liveliness, and to take that energy and give it to Jack, an artist who is able to have his heart soar. Though established actors like Matthew McConaughey, Chris O'Donnell, Billy Crudup, and Stephen Dorff were considered, Cameron felt they were too old for the part of a 20-year-old. Tom Cruise was interested, but his asking price was too high. Cameron considered Jared Leto for the role, but Leto refused to audition. Jeremy Sisto did a series of screen tests with Winslet and 3 other actresses vying for the role of Rose. Leonardo DiCaprio, 21 years old at the time, was brought to Cameron's attention by casting director Molly Finn. Initially, he did not want the role and refused to read his first romantic scene. Cameron said, "He read it once, then started goofing around, and I could never get him to focus on it again. But for one split second, a shaft of light came down from the heavens and lit up the forest." Cameron strongly believed in DiCaprio's acting ability and told him, "Look, I'm not going to make this guy brooding and neurotic. I'm not going to give him a tic and a limp and all the things you want." Cameron envisioned the character as being like those played by James Stewart or Gregory Peck. Cameron said Kate Winslet had the thing that you look for, and that there was a quality in her face, in her eyes, that he just knew people would be ready to go the distance with her. Winslet said of her character, She has got a lot to give, and she's got a very open heart, and she wants to explore and adventure the world, but she feels that's not going to happen. Gwyneth Paltrow, Winona Ryder, Claire Danes, who had worked with DiCaprio in Romeo plus Juliet the previous year, Gabrielle Anwar, and Reese Witherspoon were considered for the role. When they turned it down, Winslet campaigned heavily for the role. She sent Cameron daily notes from England, which led Cameron to invite her to Hollywood for auditions. As with DiCaprio, casting director Molly Finn originally brought her to Cameron's attention. When looking for a Rose, Cameron described the character as an Audrey Hepburn type. He was initially uncertain about casting Winslet even after her screen test impressed him. After she screen tested with DiCaprio, Winslet was so thoroughly impressed with him that she whispered to Cameron, "He's great. Even if you don't pick me, pick him." Winslet sent Cameron a single rose with a card signed, "From your Rose," and lobbied him by phone. "You don't understand," she pleaded one day when she reached him by mobile phone in his Humvee. "I am Rose. I don't know why you're even seeing anyone else." Her persistence, as well as her talent, eventually convinced him to cast her in the role. Cameron initially considered Michael Biehn for the role of Cal Hockley, whom he had previously collaborated with on The Terminator, Aliens, and The Abyss for the role, before offering it to Matthew McConaughey, and Rob Lowe said he pursued it. Cameron stated of the role of the modern-day Rose Dawson Calvert, "In order to see the present and the past, I decided to create a fictional survivor who is close to 101 years, and she connects us in a way through history. The 101-year-old Rose gives Lovett information regarding the heart of the ocean after he discovers a nude drawing of her in the wreck. She shares the story of her time aboard the ship and speaks about her relationship with Jack for the first time since the sinking. At 87, Gloria Stewart had to be made up to look older for the role." Of casting Stewart, Cameron stated, "My casting director found her. She was sent out on a mission to find retired actresses from the golden age of the 30s and 40s. Cameron said that he did not know who Stewart was. Fay Wray was also considered for the role, but Cameron said, "Stewart was just so into it and so lucid and had such a great spirit. And I saw the connection between her spirit and Winslet's spirit. I saw this joie de vivre in both of them, that I thought the audience would be able to make that cognitive leap that it's the same person." Reba McEntire was offered the role of Margaret Brown, but had to turn it down because it conflicted with her touring schedule. Filming. Principal photography began on July 31, 1996, at Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, with the modern-day expedition scenes aboard the academic Mstislav Keldysh 38. In September 1996, the production moved to the newly built Fox Baja Studios in Rosarito, Mexico, where a full-scale Titanic had been constructed. The poop deck was built on a hinge that could rise from 0 to 90 degrees in a few seconds, just as the ship's stern rose during the sinking. For the safety of the stuntmen, many props were made of foam rubber. By November 15th, the boarding scenes were being shot. Cameron built his Titanic on the starboard side as a study of weather data revealed it was a prevailing north to south wind, which blew the funnel smoke aft. This posed a problem for shooting the ship's departure from Southampton, as it was docked on its port side. Implementation of written directions, as well as props and costumes, had to be reversed. For example, if someone walked to their right in the script, they had to walk left during shooting. In post-production, the film was flipped to the correct direction. A full-time etiquette coach was hired to instruct the cast in the manners of the upper-class gentility in 1912. Despite this, several critics noted anachronisms in the film. Cameron sketched Jack's portrait of Rose. Winslet posed in a bathing suit. Cameron felt the scene had a backdrop of repression and freedom. "You know what it means for her, the freedom she must be feeling. It's kind of exhilarating for that reason," he said. The sketching scene was DiCaprio and Winslet's first scene together. "It wasn't by any kind of design, although I couldn't have designed it better. There's a nervousness and an energy and a hesitance in them," Cameron stated. They had rehearsed together, but they hadn't shot anything together. "If I'd had a choice, I probably would have preferred to put it deeper into the body of the shoot." Cameron said he and his crew were just trying to find things to shoot because the big set wasn't ready for months, so we were scrambling around trying to fill in anything we could get to shoot. Cameron felt the final scene worked well. The shoot was an arduous experience that cemented Cameron's formidable reputation as the scariest man in Hollywood. He became known as an uncompromising, hard-charging perfectionist and a 300-decibel screamer, a modern-day Captain Bligh with a megaphone and walkie-talkie swooping down into people's faces on a 160-set-feet crane. Winslet chipped a bone in her elbow during filming and had been worried that she would drown in the 17-meter-gallon water tank in which the ship would sink. There were times when I was genuinely frightened of him. "Jim has a temper like you wouldn't believe," she said. "God damn it," he would yell at some poor crew member. "That's exactly what I didn't want." Bill Paxton was familiar with Cameron's work ethic from his earlier experience and said, "There were a lot of people on the set. Jim is not one of those guys who has the time to win hearts and minds." The crew felt Cameron had an evil alter ego and so nicknamed him Mai, Jim spelled backwards. In response to the criticism, Cameron said, "Filmmaking is war, a great battle between business and aesthetics." More than 800 crew members worked on the film. On August 9, 1996, during the academic Mstislav Keldysh shoot in Canada, an unknown person, suspected to be a crew member, put the dissociative drug PCP into the soup that Cameron and various others ate one night in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. It sent more than 50 people to the hospital. Paxton and Cameron ate the soup and went to the hospital, but Paxton decided to leave, telling Cameron, "Jim, I'm not going to hang out here. This is bedlam. I'm going to wander back down to the set and just drink a case of beer." There were people just rolling around, completely out of it. Some of them said they were seeing streaks and psychedelics, said actor Louis Abernathy. Cameron managed to vomit before the drug took a full hold. Abernathy was shocked at the way he looked. One eye was completely red, like the Terminator eye. A pupil, no iris, beet red. The other eye looked like he'd been sniffing glue since he was 4. The Nova Scotia Department of Health confirmed that the soup had contained PCP on August 27th, and the Halifax Regional Police Service announced a criminal investigation the next day. The investigation was closed in February 1999. The person behind the poisoning was never caught. The filming schedule was intended to last 138 days, but grew to 160. Filming officially wrapped on March 23, 1997. Many cast members came down with colds, flu, or kidney infections after spending hours in cold water, including Winslet. In the end, she decided she would not work with Cameron again unless she earned a lot of money. Several others left the production, and 3 stuntmen broke their bones, but the Screen Actors Guild decided, following an investigation, that nothing was inherently unsafe about the set. Additionally, DiCaprio said there was no point when he felt he was in danger during filming. Cameron believed in a passionate work ethic and never apologized for the way he ran his sets, although he acknowledged, "I'm demanding, and I'm demanding on my crew." In terms of being kind of militaresque, I think there's an element of that in dealing with thousands of extras and big logistics and keeping people safe. I think you have to have a fairly strict methodology in dealing with a large number of people. The costs of filming Titanic ballooned and eventually reached $200 million, a bit over $1 million per minute of screen time. Fox executives panicked and suggested an hour of specific cuts from the 3-hour film. They argued the extended length would mean fewer showings, thus less revenue, even though long epics are more likely to help directors win Oscars. Cameron refused, telling Fox, "You want to cut my movie? You're going to have to fire me. You want to fire me? You're going to have to kill me." The executives did not want to start over because it would mean the loss of their entire investment. The executives initially rejected Cameron's offer to forfeit his share of the profits as an empty gesture, as they predicted profits would be unlikely. They did accept his offer of giving up his $8 million salary and his share of the initial gross profits. Cameron explained that the decision to give up that money was complex. The short version is that the film cost proportionally much more than T2 and True Lies. Those films went up 7 or 8% from the initial budget. Titanic also had a large budget to begin with, but it went up a lot more, he said. As the producer and director, I take responsibility for the studio that's writing the checks, so I made it less painful for them. I did that on 2 different occasions. They didn't force me to do it. They were glad that I did. Worried about the mounting costs, Fox wanted to find a partner studio to co-finance the film. Fox first approached Universal Pictures as they had picked up the international distribution rights to Cameron's True Lies, 1994, when production costs began to mount. However, Universal would turn Fox down. Instead, Fox and Paramount Pictures came together in May 1996, following the success both studios had collaborating on the distribution for Mel Gibson's Braveheart, 1995, and ultimately agreed to co-finance the film together and split the distribution rights. In an effort to recoup their $135 million investment, Fox sold the domestic rights to the film to Paramount in return for Paramount providing Fox an additional $65 million for production, while retaining international rights. Fox, however, would still be responsible for any further budget overruns going forward, but also retain all profits from any merchandise sold based on the film as part of the deal with Paramount. Amidst the film's successful box office run, a Fox executive, William Mechanic, commented that Jim Cameron told us we could have an expensive bad movie or a more expensive potentially great movie. We made our judgment, and we made the best choice. In July 2024, Cameron stated that it was co-producer John Landau who bore the brunt of the studio pressure when Titanic was being made. According to Cameron, Landau gave his all to provide the time and resources for me to make the film I saw in my head. Post-production. Effects. Cameron wanted to push the boundary of special effects and enlisted Digital Domain and Pacific Data Images to continue the developments in digital technology he pioneered on The Abyss and Terminator 2: Judgment Day. Many previous films about Titanic shot water in slow motion, which did not look wholly convincing. Cameron encouraged his crew to shoot their 45-foot-long, 14 meters, miniature of the ship as if we're making a commercial for the White Star Line. Afterwards, digital water and smoke were added, as were extras captured on a motion capture stage. Visual effects supervisor Rob Legato scanned the faces of many actors, including himself and his children, for the digital extras and stuntmen. There was also a 65-foot-long, 20 meters model of the ship's stern that could break in 2 repeatedly, the only miniature to be used in water. For scenes set in the ship's engines, footage of the SS Jeremiah O'Brien's engines were composited with miniature support frames, and actors shot against a green screen. In order to save money, the first-class lounge was a miniature set incorporated into a green screen backdrop behind the actors. The miniature of the lounge would later be crushed to simulate the destruction of the room, and a scale model of a first-class corridor flooded with jets of water while the camera pans out. An enclosed 5,000 U.S. gallon, 19,000 enlil tank was used for sinking interiors, in which the entire set could be tilted into the water. In order to sink the grand staircase, 90,000 U.S. gallons, 340,000 liters of water were dumped into the set as it was lowered into the tank. Unexpectedly, the waterfall ripped the staircase from its steel-reinforced foundations, although no one was hurt. The 744-foot-long, 227 meters exterior of Titanic had its first half lowered into the tank, but as the heaviest part of the ship, it acted as a shock absorber against the water. To get the set into the water, Cameron had much of the set emptied and even smashed some of the promenade windows himself. After submerging the dining saloon, 3 days were spent shooting Lovett's ROV traversing the wreck in the present. The post-sinking scenes in the freezing Atlantic were shot in a 350,000 U.S. gallon, 1,300,000 L tank, where the frozen corpses were created by applying on actors a powder that crystallized when exposed to water, and wax was coated on hair and clothes. The climactic scene, which features the breakup of the ship directly before it sinks as well as its final plunge to the bottom of the Atlantic, involved a tilting full-sized set, 150 extras, and 100 stunt performers. Cameron criticized previous Titanic films for depicting the liner's final plunge as a graceful slide underwater. He wanted to depict it as the terrifyingly chaotic event that it really was. When carrying out the sequence, people needed to fall off the increasingly tilting deck, plunging hundreds of feet below and bouncing off railings and propellers on the way down. A few attempts to film this sequence with stunt artists resulted in some minor injuries, and Cameron halted the more dangerous stunts. The risks were eventually minimized by using computer-generated people for the dangerous falls. A Linux-based operating system was utilized for the creation of the effects. Editing. Cameron said there were aspects of the Titanic story that seemed important in pre- and post-production, but became less important as the film evolved. He omitted the SS Californian, the ship that was close to the Titanic the night she sank, but had turned off its radio for the night, did not hear her crew's SOS calls, and did not respond to their distress flares. A scene involving the Californian was cut, according to Cameron, because it focuses you back onto that world. If Titanic is powerful as a metaphor, as a microcosm for the end of the world in a sense, then that world must be self-contained. He said its omission was not a compromise to mainstream filmmaking, but about emphasis, creating an emotional truth to the film. During the first assembly cut, Cameron altered the ending. In the original version, Brock and Lizzie see the elderly Rose at the stern of the boat and fear she is going to commit suicide. Rose reveals that she had the heart of the ocean diamond all along, but never sold it, to live on her own without Cal's money. She allows Brock to hold it, but tells Brock that life is priceless and throws the diamond into the ocean. After accepting that treasure is worthless, Brock laughs at his stupidity. In the editing room, Cameron decided that by this point, the audience would no longer be interested in Brock Lovett and cut the scene so that Rose is alone when she drops the diamond. He also did not want to disrupt the audience's melancholy after the Titanic sinking. Paxton agreed that his scene with Brock's epiphany and laugh was unnecessary, saying, "I would have shot heroin to make the scene work better. Our job was done by then." If you're smart and you take the ego and the narcissism out of it, you'll listen to the film, and the film will tell you what it needs and what it does not need. The version used for the first test screening featured a fight between Jack and Lovejoy after Jack and Rose escape into the flooded dining saloon. The scene was written to give the film more suspense and had Cal offering to give Lovejoy, his valet, the heart of the ocean if he can get it from Jack and Rose. Lovejoy goes after the pair in the sinking first-class dining room. Jack attacks him and smashes his head against a window. This is why Lovejoy has a gash later in the film. Test audiences said it would be unrealistic to risk one's life for wealth, and Cameron cut it for this reason, as well as for timing and pacing reasons. Many other scenes were cut for similar reasons. Heart of the Ocean. Heart of the Ocean redirects here. For other uses, see Heart of the Ocean disambiguation. For the Heart of the Ocean design, London-based jewelers Asprey and Gerard used cubic zirconias set in white gold to create an Edwardian-style necklace to be used as a prop in the film. The studio designed and produced 3 variations, very similar but unique and distinguishable in character. 2 of them were used in the film, while the third went unused until after the film had been released. The 3 necklaces are commonly known as the original prop, the J. Peterman necklace and the Asprey necklace. The third and final design was not used in the film. After the film's success, Asprey and Gerard were commissioned to create an authentic Heart of the Ocean necklace using the original design. The result was a platinum set, 171 carat, 34.2 gram, heart-shaped Ceylon sapphire surrounded by 103 diamonds. This design featured a much larger inverted pear-shaped Ceylon sapphire with a subtle cleft to resemble a heart. The chain for this necklace also featured a mix of round, pear, and marquise-cut white diamonds. The bail also featured a heart-cut white diamond with another round-cut diamond attached to an inverted pear-shaped diamond, which was then attached to the cage of the main stone. The necklace was donated to Sotheby's Auction House in Beverly Hills for an auction benefiting the Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Fund and Southern California's Aid for AIDS. It was sold to an unidentified Asprey client for $1.4 million, equivalent to $2.7 million in 2024, under the agreement that Dion would wear it 2 nights later at the 1998 Academy Awards ceremony. Since then, this necklace has not been made available for public viewing. Soundtrack. Main articles: Titanic, music from the motion picture, and Back to Titanic. Cameron wrote Titanic while listening to the work of the Irish New Age musician Enya. After Enya declined an invitation to compose for the film, Cameron instead chose James Horner. The two had parted ways after a tumultuous working experience on Aliens, but Titanic cemented a successful collaboration that lasted until Horner's death. For the vocals heard throughout the film, Horner chose the Norwegian singer Sissel Kyrkjebø, commonly known as Sissel. Horner knew Sissel from her album Innerst i Sjælen and particularly liked how she sang "Jeg vet I himmerik a borg," I know in heaven there is a castle. He tried around 30 singers before choosing Sissel. Horner wrote the end theme, "My Heart Will Go On," in secret with Will Jennings because Cameron did not want any songs in the film. Celine Dion agreed to record a demo at the persuasion of her husband, René Angelil. Horner waited until Cameron was in an appropriate mood before presenting him with the song. After playing it several times, Cameron declared his approval, although worried that he would have been criticized for going commercial at the end of the movie. Cameron also wanted to appease anxious studio executives and saw that a hit song from his movie could only be a positive factor in guaranteeing its completion. The soundtrack was the best-selling album of 1998, with sales of over 27 million. Release. Theatrical. Distribution for Titanic was split between Paramount Pictures and 20th Century Fox, Paramount handling the domestic distribution and Fox handling the foreign release. Both studios expected Cameron to complete the film for a release on July 2, 1997. The film was to be released on this date, to exploit the lucrative summer season ticket sales when blockbuster films usually do better. In April, Cameron said the film's special effects were too complicated and that releasing the film on that date would not be possible. The studios considered pushing the film to late July or the first week of August, but Harrison Ford, whose film Air Force One was to be released on July 25th, is reported to have informed Paramount, which had produced his lucrative Indiana Jones and Jack Ryan franchises, that he would never work with them again if they released Titanic so close to his own film. On May 29, 1997, Paramount pushed back the release date to December 19, 1997. The film's new release date would be shared by Tomorrow Never Dies and Mouse Hunt. This fueled speculation that the film itself was a disaster. A preview screening in Minneapolis on July 14th generated positive reviews, and chatter on the internet was responsible for more favorable word of mouth about the film. This eventually led to more positive media coverage. Cameron refused to hold the film's world premiere in Los Angeles. Paramount disagreed with Cameron's decision, but Fox acquiesced and went ahead and held the premiere on November 1, 1997, at the Tokyo International Film Festival, where reaction was described as tepid by the New York Times. Positive reviews started to appear back in the United States. The official Hollywood premiere occurred on December 14, 1997, where the big movie stars who attended the opening were enthusiastically gushing about the film to the world media. The film had a London premiere as a royal film performance attended by Prince Charles. Home media. Titanic was released worldwide in widescreen and pan and scan formats on VHS on September 1, 1998. There are 2 separate cassettes on this release, as the film is divided into 2 parts. More than $50 million was spent to market the home video release of the film. Both VHS formats were also made available in a deluxe boxed gift set with a mounted film strip and 6 lithograph prints from the movie. In the first 3 months, the film sold 25 million copies in North America with a total sales value of $500 million, becoming the best-selling live-action video, beating Independence Day. In that time, it sold 58 million copies worldwide, outselling The Lion King for a total worldwide revenue of $995 million. By March 2005, the film has sold 8 million DVD and 59 million VHS units. In the United Kingdom, the film sold 1.1 million copies on its first day of release, making it the country's fastest-selling home video release. It would hold this record until it was surpassed by Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone in May 2002, when that film sold 1.2 million home video units during its first day. The film would also remain as the fastest-selling DVD in the United Kingdom until Mamma Mia took it in 2008. 1 in 19. Within the first week of release, Titanic quickly beat The Full Monty, selling a total of 1.8 million home video copies. NBC acquired the U.S. television broadcast rights for $30 million, which was considered a bargain. A DVD version was released on August 31, 1999, in a widescreen-only, non-anamorphic, single-disc edition with no special features other than a theatrical trailer. Cameron stated at the time that he intended to release a special edition with extra features later. This release became the best-selling DVD of 1999 and early 2000, becoming the first DVD ever to sell 1 million copies. At the time, less than 5% of all U.S. homes had a DVD player. When we released the original Titanic DVD, the industry was much smaller, and bonus features were not the standard they are now, said Megan Burrows, Paramount's president of domestic home entertainment, which made the film's DVD performance even more impressive. Titanic was re-released to DVD on October 25, 2005, when a 3-disc special collector's edition was made available in the United States and Canada. This edition contained a newly restored transfer of the film, a 6.1 DTS-ES discrete surround sound mix, and various special features. In PAL regions, 2-disc and 4-disc variants were released, marketed as the Special Edition and Deluxe Collector's Edition respectively. They were released in the United Kingdom on November 7, 2005. A limited 5-disc set of the film, under the title Deluxe Limited Edition, was also only released in the United Kingdom with only 10,000 copies manufactured. The 5th disc contains Cameron's documentary Ghosts of the Abyss, which was distributed by Walt Disney Pictures. Unlike the individual release of Ghosts of the Abyss, which contained 2 discs, only the first disc was included in the set. In 2007, for the film's 10th anniversary, a 10th anniversary edition was released on DVD, which consists of the first 2 discs from the 3-disc 2005 set containing the movie and the special features on those discs. The film was released by Paramount Home Entertainment on Blu-ray and Blu-ray 3D on September 10, 2012. The 3D presentation of the film is split over 2 discs and is also THX certified. Special features on another disc included many of those featured on the 2005 Special Collector's Edition DVD, along with 2 new documentaries titled Reflections on Titanic and Titanic, The Final Word with James Cameron. The latter aired on National Geographic on April 9, 2012, and was executively produced by Cameron. A 4K release of the film was released on December 5, 2023, on both digital and Ultra HD Blu-ray. After previously being on the Amazon Prime Video streaming service in the US in April 2023, the film became available on Netflix in July 2023, shortly after the Titan submersible implosion. The film became available on Paramount Plus in October 2023 and on Prime Video for a period starting in April 2024 and April 2025. The film was announced as coming to Hulu in February 2025. It was available on the free ad-supported streaming service Pluto TV in June 2023. Reception. Box office. Including revenue from the 2012, 2017, and 2023 reissues, Titanic earned $674.3 million in North America and $1.59 billion in other countries, for a worldwide total of $2.264 billion. It became the highest-grossing film of all time worldwide in 1998, beating Jurassic Park. The film remained so for 12 years, until Avatar, 2009, also written and directed by Cameron, surpassed it in 2010. It would hold the record for being Paramount's highest-grossing film domestically until it was dethroned by Top Gun: Maverick, 2022, 25 years later, 142. On March 1, 1998, it became the first film to earn more than $1 billion worldwide. And on the weekend, April 13th, 15th, 2012, a century after the original vessel's foundering, Titanic became the second film to cross the $2 billion threshold during its 3D re-release. Box Office Mojo estimates that Titanic is the fifth highest grossing film of all time in North America when adjusting for ticket price inflation. The site also estimates that the film sold over 128 million tickets in the U.S. in its initial theatrical run. Titanic was the first foreign-language film to succeed in India, which claims to have the largest movie-going audience in the world. A Hindustan Times report attributes this to the film's similarities and shared themes with most Bollywood films. Initial theatrical run. Titanic received steady attendance after opening in North America on Friday, December 19, 1997. By the end of that same weekend, theaters were beginning to sell out. The film earned $8,658,040 on its opening day and $28,638,131 over the opening weekend from 2,674 theaters, averaging to about $10,710 per venue and ranking number one at the box office, ahead of Mouse Hunt, Scream 2, and Tomorrow Never Dies. It would go on to surpass The Godfather Part 3's record for having the highest Christmas Day gross, generating a total of $9.2 million. For its second weekend, the film made $35.6 million, making it the biggest December weekend gross, surpassing Scream 2. By New Year's Day, Titanic had made over $120 million, had increased in popularity, and theaters continued to sell out. In just 44 days, it became the fastest film to approach the $300 million mark at the domestic box office, surpassing the former record held by Jurassic Park, which took 67 days to do so. Titanic would hold this record until 1999, when it was taken by Star Wars Episode I: The Phantom Menace. Additionally, the film reached the $400 million mark within 66 days, which was the fastest at the time, a record that would be matched by Spider-Man in 2002. Both films would remain so until they were surpassed in 2004 by Shrek 2. Titanic's highest-grossing single day was Saturday, February 14, 1998, on which it earned $13,948,711, more than 8 weeks after its North American debut. On March 14th, it surpassed Star Wars as the highest-grossing film ever in North America. It stayed at number one for 15 consecutive weeks in North America, a record for any film. By April 1998, the film's number one spot would be overtaken by Lost in Space, dropping into second place. The film stayed in theaters in North America for almost 10 months before finally closing on Thursday, October 1st, 1998, with a final domestic gross of $600,788, equivalent to $176.8 million in 2024. Outside North America, the film made double its North American gross, generating $1,242,480 and accumulating a grand total of $1,843,268 worldwide from its initial theatrical run. Commercial analysis. Before Titanic's release, various film critics predicted the film would be a significant disappointment at the box office, especially since it was the most expensive film ever made at the time. When it was shown to the press in autumn of 1997, it was with massive forebodings, since the people in charge of the screenings believed they were on the verge of losing their jobs because of this great albatross of a picture, on which, finally, two studios had to combine to share the great load of its making. Cameron also thought he was headed for disaster at one point during filming. We labored the last 6 months on Titanic in the absolute knowledge that the studio would lose $100 million. It was a certainty, he stated. As the film neared release, particular venom was spat at Cameron for what was seen as his hubris and monumental extravagance. A film critic for the Los Angeles Times wrote that Cameron's overweening pride has come close to capsizing this project, and that the film was a hackneyed, completely derivative copy of old Hollywood romances. When the film became a success, with an unprecedented box office performance, it was credited for being a love story that captured its viewers' emotions. The film was playing on 3,200 screens 10 weeks after it opened, and out of its 15 straight weeks on top of the charts, jumped 43% in total sales in its ninth week of release. It earned over $20 million for each of its first 10 weekends, and after 14 weeks was still bringing in more than $1 million on weekdays. 20th Century Fox estimated that 7% of American teenage girls had seen Titanic twice by its fifth week. Although young women who saw the film several times and subsequently caused Leomania were often credited with having primarily propelled the film to its all-time box office record, other reports have attributed the film's success to positive word of mouth and repeat viewership due to the love story combined with the groundbreaking special effects. The Hollywood Reporter estimated that after a combined production and promotion cost of $487 million, the film turned a net profit of $1.4 billion, with a modern profit of as much as $4 billion after ancillary sources. Titanic's impact on men has also been especially credited. It is considered one of the films that make men cry, with MSNBC's Ian Hodder stating that men admire Jack's sense of adventure and his ambitious behavior to win over Rose, which contributes to their emotional attachment to Jack. The film's ability to make men cry was briefly parodied in the 2009 film Zombieland, where character Tallahassee, Woody Harrelson, when recalling the death of his young son, states, "I haven't cried like that since Titanic." Scott Meslow of The Atlantic stated while Titanic initially seems to need no defense, given its success, it is considered a film for 15-year-old girls by its main detractors. He argued that dismissing Titanic as fodder for teenage girls fails to consider the film's accomplishment, that this grandiose 3-plus-hour historical romantic drama is a film for everyone, including teenage boys. Meslow stated that despite the film being ranked high by males under the age of 18, matching the ratings for teenage boy-targeted films like Iron Man, it is common for boys and men to deny liking Titanic. He acknowledged his own rejection of the film as a child while secretly loving it. It's this collection of elements, the history, the romance, the action, that made and continues to make Titanic an irresistible proposition for audiences of all ages across the globe, he stated. Titanic has flaws, but for all its legacy, it's better than its middle-brow reputation would have you believe. It's a great movie for 15-year-old girls, but that doesn't mean it's not a great movie for everyone else too. Quotes in the film aided its popularity. Titanic's catchphrase, "I'm the king of the world," became one of the film industry's more popular quotations. According to Richard Harris, a psychology professor at Kansas State University who studied why people like to cite films in social situations, using film quotations in everyday conversation is similar to telling a joke and a way to form solidarity with others. People are doing it to feel good about themselves, to make others laugh, to make themselves laugh, he said. Cameron explained the film's success as having significantly benefited from the experience of sharing. When people have an experience that's very powerful in the movie theater, they want to go share it. They want to grab their friend and bring them so that they can enjoy it, he said. They want to be the person to bring them the news that this is something worth having in their life. That's how Titanic worked. Media Awareness Network stated, the normal repeat viewing rate for a blockbuster theatrical film is about 5%. The repeat rate for Titanic was over 20%. The box office receipts were even more impressive when factoring in the film's 3-hour and 14-minute length meant that it could only be shown 3 times a day compared to a normal movie's 4 showings. In response to this, any theaters started midnight showings and were rewarded with full houses until almost 3:30 a.m. Titanic held the record for box office gross for 12 years. Cameron's follow-up film, Avatar, was considered the first film with a genuine chance at surpassing its worldwide gross, and did so in 2010. Various explanations for why the film was able to successfully challenge Titanic were given. For one, 2/3 of Titanic's haul was earned overseas, and Avatar tracked similarly. Avatar opened in 106 markets globally and was No. 1 in all of them. And the markets such as Russia, where Titanic saw modest receipts in 1997 and 1998, are white-hot today, with more screens and moviegoers than ever before. Brandon Gray, president of Box Office Mojo, said that while Avatar may beat Titanic's revenue record, the film is unlikely to surpass Titanic in attendance. Ticket prices were about $3 cheaper in the late 1990s. In December 2009, Cameron had stated, "I don't think it's realistic to try to topple Titanic off its perch. Some pretty good movies have come out in the last few years. Titanic just struck some kind of chord." In a January 2010 interview, he gave a different take on the matter once Avatar's performance was easier to predict, saying, "It's gonna happen. It's just a matter of time." Author Alexandra Keller, when analyzing Titanic's success, stated that scholars could agree that the film's popularity appears dependent on contemporary culture, on perceptions of history, on patterns of consumerism and globalization, as well as on those elements experienced filmgoers conventionally expect of juggernaut film events in the 1990s: awesome screen spectacle, expansive action, and more rarely seen, engaging characters and epic drama. Critical response. Initial. Titanic garnered mostly positive reviews from film critics and was positively reviewed by audiences and scholars who commented on the film's cultural, historical, and political impacts. On review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 88% based on 255 reviews, with an average rating of 8.110. The site's critical consensus reads, "A mostly unqualified triumph for James Cameron, who offers a dizzying blend of spectacular visuals and old-fashioned melodrama." Metacritic, which assigned a weighted average score of 75 out of 100, based on 35 critics, reports the film has generally favorable reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film a rare A+ grade, one of fewer than 60 films in the history of the service from 1982 to 2011 to earn the score. With regard to the film's overall design, Roger Ebert stated, "It is flawlessly crafted, intelligently constructed, strongly acted, and spellbinding. Movies like this are not merely difficult to make at all, but almost impossible to make well." He credited the technical difficulties with being so daunting that it's a wonder when the filmmakers are also able to bring the drama and history into proportion, and found himself convinced by both the story and the sad saga. He named it his 9th best film of 1997. On the television program Siskel and Ebert, the film received 2 thumbs up and was praised for its accuracy in recreating the ship's sinking. Ebert described the film as a glorious Hollywood epic and well worth the wait. And Gene Siskel found Leonardo DiCaprio captivating. James Berardinelli stated, "Meticulous in detail, yet vast in scope and intent, Titanic is the kind of epic motion picture event that has become a rarity. You don't just watch Titanic, you experience it." It was named his 2nd best film of 1997. Joseph McBride of Box Office Magazine concluded, "To describe Titanic as the greatest disaster movie ever made is to sell it short." James Cameron's recreation of the 1912 sinking of the unsinkable liner is one of the most magnificent pieces of serious popular entertainment ever to emanate from Hollywood. The romantic and emotionally charged aspects of the film were equally praised. Andrew L. Urban of Urban Cinephile said, "You will walk out of Titanic not talking about budget or running time, but of its enormous emotive power, big as the engines of the ship itself, determined as its giant propellers to gouge into your heart, and as lasting as the love story that propels it." Owen Gleiberman of Entertainment Weekly described the film as a lush and terrifying spectacle of romantic doom. Writer-director James Cameron has restaged the defining catastrophe of the early 20th century on a human scale of such purified. Janet Maslin of the New York Times commented that Cameron's magnificent Titanic is the first spectacle in decades that honestly invites comparison to Gone with the Wind. Adrian Turner of Radio Times awarded it 4 stars out of 5, stating, "Cameron's script wouldn't have sustained Clark Gable and Vivien Leigh for 80 minutes, but somehow he and his magical cast revived that old-style studio gloss for 3 riveting hours." Titanic is a sumptuous assault on the emotions, with a final hour that fully captures the horror and the freezing, paralyzing fear of the moment. And there are single shots, such as an awesome albatross-like swoop past the steaming ship, when you sense Cameron hugging himself with the fun of it all. Titanic suffered backlash in addition to its success. Some reviewers felt that while the visuals were spectacular, the story and dialogue were weak. Richard Corliss of Time magazine wrote a mostly negative review, criticizing the lack of interesting emotional elements. Kenneth Turan's review in the Los Angeles Times was particularly scathing. Dismissing the emotive elements, he stated, "What really brings on the tears is Cameron's insistence that writing this kind of movie is within his abilities. Not only is it not, it is not even close." He later argued that the only reason that the film won Oscars was because of its box office total. Barbara Schulgasser of the San Francisco Examiner gave Titanic 1 star out of 4, citing a friend as saying, "The number of times in this unbelievably badly written script that the two lead characters refer to each other by name was an indication of just how dramatically the script lacked anything more interesting for the actors to say." Retrospective. According to Dallin Rowell of Slash Film, with complaints about its lengthy runtime, observations that certain characters could have easily fit onto pieces of floating furniture, and jokes about its melodramatic nature, Titanic is no stranger to modern-day criticism. In 2002, filmmaker Robert Altman called it the most dreadful piece of work I've ever seen in my entire life. Similarly, French New Wave director and former Cahiers du Cinéma editor Jacques Rivette referred to it as garbage in a 1998 interview with Frédéric Bonneau, and was particularly critical of Winslet's performance, who he said was unwatchable, the most slovenly girl to appear on the screen in a long, long time. In 2003, the film topped a poll of best film endings, but it also topped a poll by Film 2003 as the worst movie of all time. In his 2012 study of the lives of the passengers on the Titanic, historian Richard Davenport Hines said, "Cameron's film diabolized rich Americans and educated English, anathematizing their emotional restraint, good tailoring, punctilious manners, and grammatical training, while it made romantic heroes of the poor, Irish, and the unlettered." The British film magazine Empire reduced their rating of the film from the maximum 5 stars and an enthusiastic review to 4 stars with a less positive review in a later edition, to accommodate its readers' tastes, who wanted to disassociate themselves from the hype surrounding the film and the reported activities of its fans, such as those attending multiple screenings. In addition to this, positive and negative parodies and other such spoofs of the film abounded and were circulated on the internet, often inspiring passionate responses from fans of various opinions of the film. Benjamin Wilcock of DVDactive.com did not understand the backlash or the passionate hatred for the film. "What really irks me," he said, "are those who make nasty stabs at those who do love it." Wilcock stated, "I obviously don't have anything against those who dislike Titanic, but those few who make you feel small and pathetic for doing so, and they do exist, trust me, are way beyond my understanding and sympathy." In 1998, Cameron responded to the backlash, and Kenneth Turan's review in particular, by writing, "Titanic is not a film that is sucking people in with flashy hype and spitting them out onto the street feeling let down and ripped off. They are returning again and again to repeat an experience that is taking a 3-hour and 14-minute chunk out of their lives and dragging others with them so they can share the emotion." Cameron emphasized that people from all ages, ranging from 8 to 80, and from all backgrounds were celebrating their own essential humanity by seeing it. He described the script as earnest and straightforward, and said it intentionally incorporates universals of human experience and emotion that are timeless and familiar because they reflect our basic emotional fabric, and that the film was able to succeed in this way by dealing with archetypes. He did not see it as pandering. "Turan mistakes archetype for cliché," he said. "I don't share his view that the best scripts are only the ones that explore the perimeter of human experience or flashily pirouette their witty and cynical dialogue for our admiration." In 2000, Almar Haflidason of the BBC wrote that the critical knives were out long before James Cameron's Titanic was complete. Spiraling costs that led to it becoming the most expensive motion picture of the 20th century, and a cast without any big stars seemed to doom the film before release. But box office and audience appreciation proved Cameron right and many critics wrong. He added that the sinking of the great ship is no secret, yet for many exceeded expectations in sheer scale and tragedy. And that, when you consider that the film tops a bum-numbing 3-hour running time, then you have a truly impressive feat of entertainment achieved by Cameron. Empire eventually reinstated its original 5-star rating of the film, commenting, "It should be no surprise, then, that it became fashionable to bash James Cameron's Titanic at approximately the same time it became clear that this was the planet's favorite film ever." In 2017, on the 20th anniversary of its release, the film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. The same year, Cameron reviewed the accuracy of the film for the National Geographic program, Titanic, 20 years later with James Cameron. The film's climax has sparked many debates over the years on whether both Jack and Rose should have been able to fit on the floating door and survive, becoming among the most talked about aspects of the film. While at the time of the film's 20th anniversary, Cameron stated that it was kind of silly, really, that we're having this discussion 20 years later. In 2023, he conducted a study for the film's 25th anniversary that aired as part of an updated National Geographic retrospective, which suggested it was possible but unlikely and depended on numerous variables, after a previous test had been conducted in 2012 by Mythbusters. It was listed among the 100 best films in an Empire poll and in a later poll of members of the film industry. In 2021, Dallin Rowell of Slash Film ranked it the third best film of Cameron's career, stating that it is easily one of his best films, simply because it defied the odds, and considering it a legitimately remarkable achievement, one that, despite its large budget, has a humble, earnest center. Even with all of the jokes the internet loves to throw its way, Titanic demonstrates that Cameron is truly capable of everything he can imagine. In 2024, Looper ranked it number 44 on its list of the 50 best PG-13 movies of all time, writing, "Cameron's immersive visuals, achieved using groundbreaking special effects, transport viewers back in time to the opulence of the Titanic and the heart-wrenching chaos of its final hours." The sheer grandness of the film, combined with its tragic tale, pushed the boundaries of storytelling and visual effects, paving the way for future blockbusters. In 1998, Chinese President Jiang Zemin praised the film during an address to the National Bar. Accolade. Main article, list of accolades received by Titanic. At the Golden Globes, Titanic won Best Motion Picture, Drama, Best Director, Best Original Score, and Best Original Song. Winslet and Stewart were also nominated. At the 70th Academy Awards, Titanic garnered 14 Academy Award nominations, tying the record set in 1950 by Joseph L. Mankiewicz's All About Ever, and won 11, Best Picture, the second film about the Titanic to win that award, after 1933's Cavalcade, Best Director, Best Art Direction, Best Cinematography, Best Visual Effects, Best Film Editing, Best Costume Design, Best Sound, Gary Rydstrom, Tom Johnson, Gary Summers, Mark Ulano, Best Sound Effects Editing, Best Original Dramatic Score, Best Original Song. Winslet, Stewart, and the makeup artists were nominated, but lost to Helen Hunt in As Good as It Gets, Kim Basinger in LA Confidential, and Men in Black. Titanic was the second film to receive 11 Academy Awards after Ben-Hur, 1959. The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King matched the record in 2004. In 2017, La La Land would tie the record for having the most Academy Award nominations. Titanic won the 1997 Academy Award for Best Original Song, as well as 4 Grammy Awards for Record of the Year, Song of the Year, Best Song Written Specifically for a Motion Picture or Television, and Best Female Pop Vocal Performance. The soundtrack became the best-selling primarily orchestral soundtrack of all time, spending 16 weeks at number 1 in the United States, and was certified diamond for over 11 million copies sold in the United States alone. It was also the best-selling album of 1998 in the U.S. My Heart Will Go On won the Grammy Awards for Best Song Written Specifically for a Motion Picture or for Television. Titanic also won various awards outside the United States, including the awards of the Japanese Academy as the Best Foreign Film of the Year. It eventually won nearly 90 awards and had an additional 47 nominations from various award-giving bodies around the world. The book about the making of the film was at the top of the New York Times bestseller list for several weeks, the first time that such a tie-in book had achieved this statute. Titanic has appeared on the American Film Institute's award-winning 100 Years series 6 times. Legacy and re-releases. 3D conversion. A 2012 3D re-release was created by remastering the original to 4K resolution and post-converting to stereoscopic 3D format. The Titanic 3D version took 60 weeks and $18 million to produce, including the 4K restoration. The 3D conversion was performed by Stereo D. Digital 2D and in 2D IMAX versions were also struck from the new 4K master created in the process. The only scene entirely redone for the re-release was Rose's view of the night sky at sea on the morning of April 15, 1912. The scene was replaced with an accurate view of the night sky star pattern, including the Milky Way, adjusted for the location in the North Atlantic Ocean in April 1912. The change was prompted by the astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson, who had criticized the unrealistic star pattern. He agreed to send Cameron a corrected view of the sky, which was the basis of the new scene. The 3D version of Titanic premiered at the Royal Albert Hall in London on March 27, 2012, with James Cameron and Kate Winslet in attendance, and entered general release on April 4, 2012, 6 days before the centenary of Titanic embarking on her maiden voyage. Rolling Stone film critic Peter Travers rated the reissue 3 stars out of 4, explaining he found it pretty damn dazzling. He said, "The 3D intensifies Titanic. You are there, caught up like never before in an intimate epic that earns its place in the movie time capsule." Writing for Entertainment Weekly, Owen Gleiberman gave the film an A grade. He wrote, "For once, the visuals in a 3D movie don't look darkened or distracting. They look sensationally crisp and alive." Richard Corliss of Time, who was very critical in 1997, remained in the same mood. "I had pretty much the same reaction, fitfully awed, mostly waterlogged." In regards to the 3D effects, he noted the careful conversion to 3D lends volume and impact to certain moments. But, in separating the foreground and background of each scene, the converters have carved the visual field into discrete, not organic levels. Anne Hornaday, for The Washington Post, found herself asking whether the film's twin values of humanism and spectacle are enhanced by Cameron's 3D conversion, and the answer to that is they aren't. She added that the 3D conversion creates distance where there should be intimacy, not to mention odd moments in framing and composition. The film grossed an estimated $4.7 million on the first day of its re-release in North America, including midnight preview showings, and went on to make $17.3 million over the weekend, finishing in third place behind The Hunger Games and American Reunion. Outside North America, it earned $35.2 million, finishing second, and it improved on its performance the following weekend by topping the box office with $98.9 million. China has proven to be its most successful territory, where it earned $11.6 million on its opening day, going on to earn a record-breaking $67 million in its opening week, and taking more money in the process than it did in the entirety of its original theatrical run. The reissue earned $343.4 million worldwide, with $145 million coming from China and $57.8 million from Canada and the United States. With a worldwide box office of nearly $350 million, the 3D re-release of Titanic remains the highest-grossing re-released film of all time, ahead of The Lion King, Star Wars, and Avatar. The 3D conversion of the film was also released in the 4DX format in selected international territories, which allows the audience to experience the film's environment using motion, wind, fog, lighting, and scent-based special effects. 20th Anniversary. For the 20th anniversary of the film, Titanic was re-released in cinemas in Dolby Vision in both 2D and 3D for 1 week beginning December 1, 2017. 25th Anniversary. Titanic was re-released in theaters by Paramount domestically and Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures through the 20th Century Studios and Buena Vista International labels internationally on February 10, 2023, in a remastered 3D 4K HDR render with high frame rate as part of the film's 25th anniversary. For this version, the international prints update 20th Century's logo with the studio's current name as a result of Disney's 2019 acquisition of the studio. Live. Titanic Live was a live performance of Horner's original score by a 130-piece orchestra, choir, and Celtic musicians, accompanying a showing of the film. In April 2015, Titanic Live premiered at the Royal Albert Hall, London, where the 2012 3D re-release had premiered. Like a great iron sphinx on the ocean floor, the Titanic faces still toward the west, interrupted forever on its only voyage. We see it in the opening shots of Titanic, encrusted with the silt of 85 years. A remote-controlled TV camera snakes its way inside, down corridors and through doorways, showing us staterooms built for millionaires and inherited by crustaceans. These shots strike precisely the right note. The ship calls from its grave for its story to be told, and if the story is made of showbiz and hype, smoke and mirrors, well, so was the Titanic. She was the largest moving work of man in all history, a character boasts, neatly dismissing the pyramids in the Great Wall. There is a shot of her early in the film, sweeping majestically beneath the camera from bow to stern, nearly 900 feet long and unsinkable. It was claimed, until an iceberg made an irrefutable reply. James Cameron's 194-minute, $200 million film of the tragic voyage is in the tradition of the great Hollywood epics. It is flawlessly crafted, intelligently constructed, strongly acted, and spellbinding. If its story stays well within the traditional formulas for such pictures, well, you don't choose the most expensive film ever made as your opportunity to reinvent the wheel. We know before the movie begins that certain things must happen. We must see the Titanic sail and sink and be convinced we are looking at a real ship. There must be a human story, probably a romance involving a few of the passengers. There must be vignettes involving some of the rest, and a subplot involving the arrogance and pride of the ship's builders, and perhaps also their courage and dignity. And there must be a reenactment of the ship's terrible death throes. It took 2.5 hours to sink, so that everyone aboard had time to know what was happening and to consider their actions. All of those elements are present in Cameron's Titanic, weighted and balanced like ballast, so that the film always seems in proportion. The ship was made out of models, large and small, visual effects, and computer animation. You know intellectually that you're not looking at a real ocean liner, but the illusion is convincing and seamless. The special effects don't call inappropriate attention to themselves, but get the job done. The human story involves a 17-year-old woman named Rose DeWitt Bukater, Kate Winslet, who is sailing to what she sees as her own personal doom. She has been forced by her penniless mother to become engaged to marry a rich, supercilious snob named Cal Hockley, Billy Zane, and so bitterly does she hate this prospect that she tries to kill herself by jumping from the ship. She is saved by Jack Dawson, Leonardo DiCaprio, a brash kid from steerage, and of course, they will fall in love during the brief time left to them. The screenplay tells their story in a way that unobtrusively shows off the ship. Jack is invited to join Rose's party at dinner in the first-class dining room, and later, fleeing from Cal's manservant, Lovejoy, David Warner, they find themselves first in the awesome engine room with pistons as tall as churches, and then at a rousing Irish dance in the crowded steerage. At one point, Rose gives Lovejoy the finger. Did young ladies do that in 1912? Their exploration is intercut with scenes from the command deck, where the captain, Bernard Hill, consults with Andrews, Victor Garber, the ship's designer, and Ismay, Jonathan Hyde, the White Star Line's managing director. Ismay wants the ship to break the transatlantic speed record. He is warned that icebergs may have floated into the hazardous northern crossing, but is scornful of danger. The Titanic can easily break the speed record, but is too massive to turn quickly at high speed. There is an agonizing sequence that almost seems to play in slow motion, as the ship strains and shudders to turn away from an iceberg in its path and fails. We understand exactly what is happening at that moment because of an ingenious story technique by Cameron, who frames and explains the entire voyage in a modern story. The opening shots of the real Titanic, we are told, are obtained during an expedition led by Brock Lovett, Bill Paxton, an undersea explorer. He seeks precious jewels but finds a nude drawing of a young girl. Meanwhile, an ancient woman sees the drawing on TV and recognizes herself. This is Rose, Gloria Stewart, still alive at 101. She visits Paxton and shares her memories. "I can still smell the fresh paint." And he shows her video scenes from his explorations, including a computer simulation of the Titanic's last hours, which doubles as a briefing for the audience. By the time the ship sinks, we already know what is happening and why, and the story can focus on the characters while we effortlessly follow the stages of the Titanic's sinking. Movies like this are not merely difficult to make at all, but almost impossible to make well. The technical difficulties are so daunting that it's a wonder when the filmmakers are also able to bring the drama and history into proportion. I found myself convinced by both the story and the saga. The setup of the love story is fairly routine, but the payoff, how everyone behaves as the ship is sinking, is wonderfully written, as passengers are forced to make impossible choices. Even the villain, played by Zane, reveals a human element at a crucial moment. Despite everything, damn it all, he does love the girl. The image from the Titanic that has haunted me ever since I first read the story of the great ship involves the moments right after it sank. The night sea was quiet enough so that cries for help carried easily across the water to the lifeboats, which drew prudently away. Still dressed up in the latest fashions, hundreds froze and drowned. What an extraordinary position to find yourself in after spending all that money for a ticket on an unsinkable ship. After unbridled celebration, followed by backlash that threatened to delegitimize its legacy, and then ongoing debate about its worth, James Cameron's Titanic, a tale of romance and shipwreck, remains a generous, compassionate spectacle. Today, it's difficult to grasp the phenomenon and its omnipresence in pop culture. After becoming the highest-grossing film of all time, it turned into a cultural landmark and reference point to be quoted, lampooned, revered, and copied. Stars Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio became the faces of our romantic yearning, while Kate and Leo became shorthand for a coupling, almost as universal as saying Romeo and Juliet, despite their romance being limited to their respective characters, Rose and Jack. And then there's Celine Dion, whose career still relies on the Oscar-winning song My Heart Will Go On. Most of the discussion about the film occurred in the years immediately following its release in 1997, leading up to Cameron's next biggest movie of all time, Avatar, from 2009. Upon revisiting the film for the first time in about 20 years, I was struck by its humanness. Stepping back from the cultural sensation of the thing, Cameron's devotion to craft, detail, and accessible storytelling remains at the center of this viewing experience. And though the special FX and visual splendor were once central to the famously expensive production, those elements, which have aged to varying degrees of satisfaction, remain secondary to its touching melodrama. Rare is the Cameron film that fails to engage both the heart and the senses. From The Terminator and its sequel to Alien, from The Abyss to True Lies, his work is rooted in humanity, though each of these films is propelled by high-concept action. Even Avatar, a film often praised for its eye-popping CGI over its complex characters, requires our empathy for a marginalized and subjugated alien race. Characters realized with computers, though they prove more sympathetic, thus more real than the story's human colonizers. Titanic follows Cameron's usual track on the heart and senses, immersing the viewer in a passionate love affair, while also dropping us into a desperate situation of survival and panic. It works so well because it places the viewer into impossible circumstances. We know what will happen. The ship will sink in the North Atlantic after striking an iceberg, leaving 1,500 of its passengers dead. But during its nearly 3.5-hour runtime, Cameron manages to make the viewer forget about the disaster and lose ourselves in a tale of class elitism and impassioned romance, the stuff of a classic melodrama. For well over an hour, the viewer is effortlessly drawn into a story of star-crossed lovers on a ship of dreams, to the extent that, when the iceberg finally makes an appearance, Cameron has succeeded in making us forget that the ship will inevitably sink. No longer are we passive viewers, watching the famed disaster from a safe historical distance, like passers-by watching a car wreck with perverse curiosity. He has turned us into participants who dread the sinking ship and ache for its passengers. We experience it. "I never got it," says deep-sea researcher Brock Lovett, Bill Paxton, who's obsessed with the treasures lost on the sunken RMS Titanic. "I never let it in." Not until Lovett hears Rose's stirring personal account of the events leading up to the ship's demise does he fully understand the power and humanity of the Titanic's story. The film makes us realize that if we've read non-fiction accounts of the Titanic disaster, or even just the Wikipedia entry, their descriptions of the ship and dry historical summations have failed to capture our emotions and imagination the way cinema can. Lovett, a modern-day pirate with an earring, is evidently the audience's proxy. He has approached the sunken ship from the perspective of its aftermath, an amazing story whose only basis in reality are the artifacts disintegrating at the bottom of the ocean. Cameron's ability to reframe our perspective speaks to his skill as a storyteller, though he often receives more credit as a technical director. What attracted me on this viewing of Titanic was how well the flashback story structure frames the disaster through the lens of a melodrama. It both prepares us for what's coming and uses our foreknowledge to enhance our engagement. The film opens with Lovett using underwater drones and searching for the heart of the sea, a fictional diamond that represents the ultimate payday. Instead, he finds only a drawing of Rose, sketched on the day the ship sank. Gloria Stewart plays the 100-year-old survivor who soon arrives on Lovett's vessel to tell her story, what is promised to be a grand tale of love and feminist awakening that also explains what happened to the diamond. Lovett listens, and so do we. By making us Rose's audience, Cameron has thus piqued our curiosity from the perspective of a treasure hunter, historian, participant in the wreck, and audience member in cinema or home theater. Before the old woman tells her story, one of Lovett's experts plays a crude animated recreation of what scientific evidence suggests happened to the ship, explaining why it sank in layman's terms. This is a stroke of genius on Cameron's part. It establishes just what will happen to the ship later in the film, but it does so with unconvincing animation that appears laughable next to the spectacle Cameron has in store. But first, there's an enchanted love story. Leonardo DiCaprio's Jack, a starving artist and tumbleweed blowing in the wind, wins his passage to New York aboard the newly christened ship, where he finds Kate Winslet's Rose in a doomed engagement to the uber-rich and patriarchal Cal Hockley, Billy Zane. It will be a marriage of convenience, urged by Rose's conscientious mother Ruth, Frances Fisher, regardless of whether the idea of marrying Cal makes Rose want to commit suicide. Jack prevents Rose from leaping into the icy waters of the Atlantic and earns himself a seat at a stuffy dinner with Rose's circle of first-class blue bloods, which Cameron contrasts with the party below decks in the third-class compartments. A scene of Irish dancing and drinking in which Rose and Jack fall madly in love. After Rose devotes herself to Jack, poses for a nude drawing, and makes love with him in the cargo hold, the ship hits the dreaded iceberg due to a number of oversights and unnecessary risks by Captain Edward John Smith, Bernard Hill, and crew. The breakthrough CGI of the ship and its eventual plunge into the ocean looked uneven in 1997 and still wobbles today. The initial shots of the RMS Titanic at port, where Cameron's indulgent digital frame passes over loading docks flooded with passengers, are among the film's best. Later, when Kate and Leo have captured the audience's gaze, it's best not to look at the ship nor dwell on certain lines of dialogue. "I'm flying, Jack." Once it strikes the iceberg, about 90 minutes into the picture, the remaining runtime shows Cameron at his best. He delivers a relentless procession of increasingly desperate circumstances that seem to build and build with almost unbearable tension. Doorways burst open from water, amassing on the other side. Hallways become claustrophobic spaces of ice-cold current. The first-class snobs try to prevent the third-class passengers from making it to the lifeboats. Each of Cameron's action films unravel in this way, rushing from one breathless moment to the next. Titanic is no exception. As Cameron puts us in the middle of these situations, we remember the computer simulations shown by Lovett's colleague earlier in the film, except now the progression of events that lead to the ship sinking look real. Well, mostly. The smokestack that falls into the water onto Jack's friend Fabrizio, played in a gross Italian stereotype by Danny Nucci, has always looked fuzzy and pixelated. But images of the half-submerged ship, its lights glimmering on the still surface of the Atlantic, remain visually arresting. Less convincing is Zane's performance as Rose's husband-to-be, the resident villain. Underneath a laughable wig and over-groomed eyebrows, Zane overacts every gesture and every expression to intolerable degrees. His presence approaches camp and almost single-handedly derails the film's integrity. Perhaps this was Cameron's intention, to create such a deplorable, visually artificial man that could only serve to bolster another of his strong heroines. Indeed, though Leo received top billing and adorned the many posters that covered the bedroom walls of teenage girls in the 1990s, the film belongs to Winslet's Rose DeWitt Booter. The film's main narrative thrust, after all, follows Rose from an oppressed turn-of-the-century woman to an independent, modern feminist determined to be a survivor. In Jack's last moments, as he progresses into deeper shades of blue as he freezes, Rose promises him that she will survive. It's the only thing that will give his death meaning. This self-actualization arc reaches beyond her romance with Jack and outlasts the titular passenger liner. It is an arc that follows Rose from the docks, where she's little more than Cal's garnish, to some 8 decades later when she's 100 years old, having lived a full life. In that sense, the common criticisms of Cameron's film, which question the utility of a love story in the middle of a disaster film, are misguided and overlook the dramatic focus on Rose, not Jack and Rose. Every James Cameron film boasts a strong woman that defies the reductive stereotypes of her gender. Sarah Connor, Linda Hamilton in The Terminator and T2 Judgment Day, Ellen Ripley, Sigourney Weaver in Aliens, Dr. Lindsay Brigman, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio in The Abyss, Helen Tasker, Jamie Lee Curtis in True Lies, and Neytiri, Zoe Saldana in Avatar. Rose belongs among them, whereas Jack is secondary, a catalyst that helps Rose gain a sense of independence, fight for a life away from Cal and her mother, and escape from the reductive roles of motherhood and familial obligation. Of course, Jack saves her life on a number of occasions as the boat begins to flood, and he helps maintain hope in those final moments in the water. And much of the film is seen from his point of view, such as when he waits for Rose on the stairs, a scene that quickly shifts to Rose's point of view. She watches Jack waiting before she descends the stairs, and the moment culminates in a dreamily romantic embrace, right under the nose of Cal and Rose's mother, no less. Rose is the one who, after Cal's bodyguard, an excellent David Warner, captures Jack and handcuffs him to a pipe, ventures into the flooding corridor to find an axe, which she then carries back, guiding herself along in 4-foot-deep water with one hand clinging to the overhead pipe and another gripping the axe, and uses it to break her man free. She's the one who liberates herself from the gold-digging ambitions of her mother. Oh, mother, shut up! Because she would rather die than be reduced to a mere obedient wife on her rich husband's arm. And she's the one who takes the entire wooden door for herself, inciting endless debates about whether Jack could have fit. The answer, he could have fit. They should have piled atop one another to keep warm. She's also the one who doesn't want her memories turned into a museum piece to be fawned over and profited from by men such as Lovett, leading her plop the heart of the sea into the dark waters of the Atlantic, if for nothing else than her own peace of mind. My point is this. Titanic may be a disaster film with a secondary melodrama attached to it, but the auxiliary narrative is not just a love story. It's a tale of a woman shifting from an object to a subject. Before Titanic's debut, it was impossible to escape the discussion about it. Whether or not you followed movies, you knew about the scope and subject of Cameron's film. It may be the last of its kind in that sense, a true crossover film. Media outlets everywhere covered its long and historically expensive production. I was 14 when I first read the behind-the-scenes reports. It was the first film whose development I followed in magazines like Entertainment Weekly and Premiere, and also on the relatively new concept of online film forums, where commentators remarked that the incredible $200 million budget required two major studios, 20th Century Fox and Paramount Pictures, to finance it, not to mention Cameron's own salary, which he contributed to offset the production costs. And what if the film bombed? Would Cameron, director of Aliens and The Abyss, two of my favorite films as a teenager, suddenly lose everything? The delay from July to December 1997 certainly indicated a troubled production. Elsewhere, reports of Cameron's behavior compared him to Captain Bligh. He screamed at technicians about getting things right. Some even raised concerns about the actor's safety. But then Cameron is not only a perfectionist, but a bona fide genius. Much like Stanley Kubrick, he labors over every detail, and he knows the craft so well that if you're working on his set, he can probably do your job better than you can. He is a demanding visionary who once compared filmmaking to a war between art and commerce, and he has perpetuated that war with his behavior. Of course, time flattened many of the pre-release concerns about Titanic. Today, it's almost commonplace for studios like Disney and Warner Bros. To spend $200 million, often much more, on the latest superhero extravaganza, and media outlets regularly cover the productions of such mega-budget titles. What remains unique about Titanic is how ubiquitous it was in the zeitgeist. It still holds a record for remaining #1 at the box office for 15 consecutive weeks, whereas subsequent earners such as Cameron's Avatar, Star Wars Episode VII The Force Awakens, 2015, and Avengers Endgame, 2019, each had comparatively shorter runs in first place at the multiplexes. Everyone saw Titanic, regardless of their demographic. Adjusted for inflation at the time of this review, Titanic's ticket sales have only been outperformed by 4 films in the history of cinema: Gone with the Wind, 1939, Star Wars, 1977, The Sound of Music, 1965, and E.T., the Extraterrestrial, 1982. No film in the 21st century even comes close, and it's difficult to imagine another film like Titanic coming along to unite our fragmented society, which depends so much on specificity and cultural bubbles that a crossover film such as this seems impossible. At the Academy Awards ceremony on March 23, 1998, Titanic still held a top spot at the box office several months after its initial release. Its staying power, flourishing on a curious mixture of spectacle, history, romantic melodrama, thrills, and teenage girls crushing on Leonardo DiCaprio after his breakout success on Romeo's Juliet, 1996, was unprecedented. Cameron's film, which naysayers predicted would flop, earned a whopping 11 Oscars, setting a record only matched by Ben-Hur, 1959, and The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, 2003. Cameron recognized the situation in his acceptance speech for Best Director. "I'm king of the world," he proclaimed like a true cornball, while he also drove home the point that his detractors were so embarrassingly wrong about his monumental project. If Cameron's ego about his craft and success became part of his, sometimes maligned, persona in Hollywood, the situation was escalated by the performance of his next feature, Avatar, which was the first film to unseat Titanic's record-breaking performance. Both Titanic and Avatar sold more tickets than the MCU's current record-breaker, Avengers Endgame. And so perhaps Cameron's ego remains justified, despite what could be described as a lack of modesty on his part. Ultimately, this discussion of box office performance and cultural significance serves to contextualize Titanic's place and importance in history, though the film's cultural footprint extends beyond its monetary totals or the number of awards it received. It's an impressive object for what it represents, as Roger Ebert observed. Movies like this are not merely difficult to make at all, but almost impossible to make well. To be sure, the number of things that had to go right for Titanic to work as it does are staggering to imagine. But these discussions are extra-textual of the film itself. Push aside the phenomenon, which too often limits Titanic's place in film history, and what's left is an immersive and affecting experience that may have been lost amid the talk about its making, its superstar performers, and its box office receipts. In the end, I didn't care about the countless awards or the monumentality of the production. I found myself engaging with Rose and her journey of self, and less immersed in the sheer spectacle of it all, and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please like it, share it, and forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.